Hey story lovers, welcome back to MidnightTales. Get ready for a ride that'll keep you glued to your screen. A tale of grit, grace, and justice, served at 30,000 feet. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and let's see how far our stories travel on MidnightTales. Alina Pierce stepped onto the plane, her sleek navy pantsuit catching the soft glow of the cabin lights. As the CEO of a tech firm valued at over $1.2 billion, she was no stranger to turning heads, but not always for the right reasons. Her presence in first class was a statement, a quiet declaration of her place in a world that often tried to shrink her. Today was no ordinary flight. She was en route to Paris to close a deal that could change the game for dozens of Black-owned startups under her mentorship. A partnership that could ripple through communities and reshape futures. But as she approached her seat, her stride slowed. A tall white man was sprawled there, legs stretched out, a glass of champagne in hand, looking as if he owned the place. Alina's lips tightened, but her voice stayed steady. "I believe you're in my seat," she said, meeting his gaze. He looked up, his eyes scanning her with a lazy arrogance before settling into a smirk. "You sure about that, sweetheart?" he drawled, not budging an inch. The word stung, but Alina had heard worse. She pulled out her boarding pass, holding it up like a shield. To a no mistake, the man chuckled, swirling his drink, his confidence unshaken. A flight attendant appeared, her smile tight and professional. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her eyes flickering between Alina and the man. "This gentleman is in my seat," Alina said, her tone even but firm. The attendant glanced at the man, who hadn't moved, his relaxed posture practically daring her to challenge him. Then she turned to Alina, her smile faltering. "Ma'am, are you certain you're in first class?" The question hit like a slap, sharp and deliberate. Alina's jaw clenched, but she held her ground. "Yes, I'm certain," she said, handing over her boarding pass. The attendant took it, her eyes lingering on Alina as if searching for something to disprove her claim. Passengers nearby began to stir, their whispers filling the cabin like static. A few pulled out their phones, cameras discreetly angled, capturing the scene. Alina felt the familiar burn of humiliation creeping up her spine, that old exhausting ache of being questioned, doubted, erased. She'd built a billion-dollar empire, sat in boardrooms with the world's elite, yet here she was, standing in a first-class cabin, made to feel like an intruder. The flight attendant leaned toward the man. "Sorry for the inconvenience, sir. We'll sort this out," she said, her voice dripping with deference. Then, turning to Alina, she added, "Please step aside while we verify your ticket." Step aside. The words echoed in Alina's mind, each syllable a reminder of every time she'd been pushed to the margins. She stood there, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear but from a rage she'd learned to keep tightly leashed. The man in 2A sipped his champagne, his grin barely concealed, as if he were enjoying the show. Minutes dragged on, each one heavier than the last. A gate agent boarded, her expression unreadable as she approached Alina. "I'll need to see your ID for a manual verification," she said, her tone clipped. Alina handed over her driver's license, her fingers steady despite the storm brewing inside her. The agent took it and disappeared, leaving Alina exposed to the stares of the cabin. Some passengers looked away, uncomfortable. Others watched openly, their curiosity tinged with judgment. She stood there, publicly scrutinized, as if the first-class ticket she'd paid triple for was somehow a mistake, a fluke, a fraud. The man in her seat leaned back, his eyes glinting with amusement, as if he knew the world would bend in his favor. But then, something shifted. A supervisor boarded, her face tense as she whispered to the flight crew. Heads turned, eyes widened, and a hush fell over the cabin. The captain emerged from the cockpit, his presence commanding attention. "Alina Pierce," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Alina nodded, her heart pounding, not from fear but from the fire of indignation. She braced herself for more humiliation. Another delay, another indignity, but the captain's next words stopped her cold. "I just got a call from the chairman of the airline," he said, his tone measured but tight. "Your business partner. He wanted me to personally apologize for what's happened here." Alina blinked, her mind racing to process the words. The captain continued, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "You're not just a passenger. You're a strategic partner of this airline, and this treatment is unacceptable." He turned to the flight attendant, his eyes narrowing. "She stays in 2A. Move him to coach and file a report." Gasps rippled through the cabin like a wave. The man in 2A froze, his grin vanishing as the supervisor approached him. "Sir, you'll need to gather your belongings and follow me," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. He stammered, his face reddening, but the crew was already moving, their efficiency cutting through his protests. As he was escorted down the aisle, his champagne glass left behind, the cabin buzzed with a new energy. Alina returned to her seat, her head high, her spine straight. She settled into 2A, the leather cool against her skin, and let out a breath. She hadn't realized she'd been holding the plane taxied down the runway, but Alina's mind wasn't on the flight. She was thinking about every time she'd been dismissed, every sideways glance, every subtle slight that had tried to chip away at her. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about every moment she'd had to prove she belonged. Every time She'd had to fight for the space she'd earned. The captain's intervention wasn't just a win for her. It was a crack in the armor of a system that too often assumed she didn't belong. As the plane climbed into the sky, Alina opened her laptop, her fingers hovering over the keys. She wasn't thinking about the deal in Paris anymore, though it loomed large. She was thinking about the startups she mentored, the young entrepreneurs who looked to her as a beacon, the ones who'd faced the same battles she had. This moment, this victory, wasn't just hers, it was theirs too. The man who'd smirked at her now sat in economy, his arrogance deflated, his privilege checked. Alina leaned back, a glass of champagne in her hand, and took a slow sip. This wasn't revenge, it was restoration. A reminder that power wears many faces, and sometimes the world needs a sharp jolt to see it. The cabin was quiet now, the whispers replaced by the hum of the engines. Alina glanced out the window, the clouds stretching endlessly below. She thought about the passengers who'd watched, the ones who'd recorded, the ones who'd stayed silent. Maybe one of them would think twice next time. Maybe one of them would see her, or someone like her, and recognize the strength beneath the surface. Maybe this story would ripple beyond the plane, beyond MidnightTales, into the world where it was needed most. Hey, MidnightTales fam. If this story hit you as hard as it hit us, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support keeps these stories alive on MidnightTales, and we're so grateful for every one of you. Alina's story isn't just about one flight or one seat. It's about every time someone's been made to feel small, every time they've had to fight for their place. Justice came swift for Alina, thanks to a call from the top, but not everyone has a billionaire chairman in their corner. That's why we tell these stories on MidnightTales, to shine a light on the moments that matter, the ones that remind us to stand tall, to speak up, to claim our space. As the plane soared toward Paris, Alina closed her laptop and let her mind settle. The deal ahead was massive, but this moment felt bigger. It was a reminder that success doesn't look one way, and neither does power. The man in economy might have learned that lesson today, and if he didn't, someone else on that flight surely did. The world was watching, and Alina Pierce was done being invisible. Thanks for joining us on this journey, MidnightTales crew. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join the family. We drop powerful stories like this every week, and we'd love to have you along for the ride. Tell us in the comments, what's a moment when you had to stand up for your place? Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep shining, keep fighting, and keep tuning in to MidnightTales for stories that spark change. See you in the next one.